Exactly. So thanks, Alan, for the introduction, for the chance to speak again, the first in-person event for me at least since the last TADSummit, right, in London. And my story should be about CPaaS as a Telecom's grassroots project. It's not really a grassroots project as such now, but it started as one. And I started with the question, are we there yet? I wanted to present actually our way to being there. Now we are not there yet, so I got to change it a bit and tell you why we're not there yet. So the short answer is no, we're not there yet. We don't have CPaaS launched yet, but we're going to do it soon, and I'll tell you a bit of the obstacles and actually of a bit of an asymmetric journey towards it. Because the challenges were not really technological from looking at partners, but really more in doing this as a big company. So I want to recap a bit what we've done in the past 2 years. Assess shortly whether we're there or not, and what are the reasons, and in the end talk a bit about innovating from a big incumbent, looking at the specifics of the communications area as one of the things telcos did for a long time, and what are the implications of that. I'm Sebastian, I work for Deutsche Telekom in the technology unit. We are enabling Telecom Global Carrier, so that's the wholesale unit of DT. So I'm not part of technology team that works for a particular country, but we're kind of the global overlay. So any call to and from Germany or any of the other Deutsche Telekom opcos goes through our platform. We do aggregation, we do global networks, so C cables, all that stuff is in our unit, and I'm there as an architect and working on the communication space. So in short, one of the key slides here, and I stole a picture from Alan from yesterday, and I'll explain you why, is my journey with CPaaS, how long can it possibly take? And I want to start with a bit of a black and white view. The good, the bad, the ugly. I liked that yesterday in the presentation, because it's really, there's a lot of good that happens, and looking at it really black and white helps a bit to give a very frank kind of opinion. It's my opinion, so it's not really anything that is a marketing deck, but really experiences doing this. And a few of the good points I want to mention. So we are now at a point where CPaaS is discussed at board level, where it's a topic that most of the people, when you talk about APIs, they know what APIs are. They know in general how to use them, what it means. They might understand it's digital business, whatever that is. But in general, it's a term that people understand, exposing capabilities and not just having them in your products, but making others, enable others to build on top of these is something important. And it's good to have that momentum. We started with a journey, and you'll see that here on the right side. I'll kind of combine that a bit in 2020. I did CPaaS myself and WebRTC for much longer, so there are talks dating back 10 years where I'm already talking about some of these things and doing that as a telco, but not really with the classic telco mindset, but trying to look a bit from, still innovating within the telco, but trying to do whatever's possible. And so we started with that. We selected a partner for MVP. We integrated our SMS and our voice trunk, so we had immediately our connectivity, and on top of that, let's say, placed an API, and did some POCs, integrated also in what is now active or live already as a Telecom developer portal. So all of that happened already back in 2020. It started small, but we really managed to get to a momentum, mostly through external events. So I would say certainly the Ericsson Vonage discussion helped accelerate this a bit, because all of a sudden people were asking, what is this? Why is it happening? Why is valuation so high? Why is Twilio valued so high? That really hasn't happened before, even though Twilio dates back much longer. And I spoke, I think, on the last live event about Twilio versus telco, and how to compare it and why it's not really comparable in other parts. So it's really good to have this momentum and to have this awareness, looking at where we started, which was really just an idea of saying, hey, we have to do this. We cannot always explain that telephony and SMS are somewhat declining, and that's okay, because it's not actually declining. It's just shifting from classic communication over to apps and to CPaaS platforms that essentially see these minutes that you no longer see in the classic production that you would do as a carrier. Another good point is connecting the right people within a large organization. So it's easy to kind of bash telcos and say, oh, they're also legacy, but and mostly as big corporations, it's not just telcos. Any big corporation, I would say, they have a certain characteristics, because otherwise they wouldn't be that big organization, they wouldn't survive for so long, so they have to be slower. But you always have these gems in many units where you have really smart people that will eventually support you as well on an individual basis. Of course, they might be caught by politics, and we come to that later, and other things. But in general, you have a lot of knowledgeable people that you can explain what you want to achieve, and once you make these connections, it's something really good. So I can just encourage everyone who works for one of these bigger companies, if you have an idea and you get connected well and want to push an idea forward, it can eventually happen. And we are actually there to making that idea happen. And the last point is, we had also the chance, of course, to look at a diversity of other options. One of the challenges at the beginning was that we had and we talk here about a small group of handful of people that wanted to drive this topic really forward in kind of an incubation form within the company. Of course, you have your view, and your view is the only one, and it's the right one, and it's good to get it reflected here and there, right? So it's really good to exchange your thought. It won't necessarily change your view, but at least you understand a bit better where the others are coming from and why it makes sense to look also at other things. Now on the other side, there's some bad to it when you do something like that in a big organization, especially when you do this with voice and with SMS, so with the things that have a certain inheritance with it, let's say. I have not seen these dynamics when it comes to TV, for example, because TV doesn't have this history, so it's much easier to innovate with TV, to innovate with, I don't know, smart stuff, IoT stuff, let's say, smart home and so on in a company. But when you have these owners on products that are really decades old, it's much harder to bring them forward, and you will see fear of so-called cannibalization. So, whether it's your SMS or my SMS shouldn't really matter for a company at scale. The same comes even in the microcosmos of our unit. You have people that sit on SMS, you have people that sit on voice minutes, and from a CPaaS perspective, it's all a transaction, and you want to monetize the transaction and monetize what's on top of it. But for the individuals running voice and SMS, it's necessarily, it does matter whether it's an SMS or a voice message. So it's not really like a bad thing, but it's just something you have to cope with, and you have to know. And one of the reasons why 2022 was a bit like a black hole, where a lot of the efforts get sucked into discussing things like this and others. You have processes that are much more complicated in big carriers, and all of a sudden, also one of the things, I'll bring that in later, one of the biggest challenges was when the small incubation unit, we had a lot of management support. It was really great, and we were not really challenged in a way that people didn't trust us. They really trusted us, but eventually when you want to roll that out for a group such as TT, you hit the organization. You have to hit them because you're not a startup, you're not entirely independent, and once you hit the others, you have to deal essentially with the process everyone has to deal with. And normally staff projects have much more people, and people working on these processes, for them you're just one of many that want something from them, and they don't understand that one of their questions sets you back 2 weeks because it takes a lot of time to answer this, and all of that in the end is, I would say, one of the reasons why things don't go as fast as they could. On the other hand, I think still on a very good way. Last point here, worry rewards, so people that think, should we do this, should we not do it, question the right to play, even though it's fairly obvious that there is one, in my opinion. So it's something you have to deal with. And then the ugly part, and that's really something, does one put something like this on a slide or not? I think opportunism and myopia in general is something, and also internal politics, that is worth mentioning, because it's in my opinion, it's something you are going to face, and of course in such a topic where you see companies skyrocket and ideas skyrocket, of course it people might think it makes sense to just try to benefit as much from their growth with very little involvement of your own teams, and trust in your own teams, whether or not you have the competencies or not. And on the other hand, we talk a lot about people, and I think CPaaS is specifically a topic that involves people quite a lot, transformation and skill transformation, and getting people there that they are actually able to understand what their customer wants, not just bring products out there that others have done already, but really try to do this to yourself. Try to also transform your technology competencies from classic core telco to more of WebRTC and of web scale type of things. I think that's an important point, and here I think sometimes in the discussions I've seen, not really in that project and not with it's nothing particular, but I think it's something worth having in mind when it comes to a big one of those big incumbents doing something like this that you just have to deal with, and that it's really slowing you down. So looking at the right side here, this is a very few milestones of that journey from 2020, as I mentioned already, 2022, end of 22, we had a platform live. We had it connected to our voice and SMS termination. So it was essentially, you could, when you would make a call, it would end up in a minute in our platform. We had already a Telecom developer portal prototype live, and we had a partner do that. We even had some informal POCs that where companies asked us and they said, hey, we heard you do CPaaS, can you help us here? A customer wants this, and we did kind of a demo for them, and they liked it, and they were like, can we use it for testing things? And you might not be there yet commercially, but once you're there, we just want to, we want to give you some feedback. That was quite good. But we could do this already. But yeah, in the end, we had a portal with a CPaaS service integrated, and that was exciting because it was rather short. We met the right people throughout that process. Then in 21, we did a lot of internal awareness campaigns. The benefit was we did that not with slideware, but with something actual, tangible to show. So we could do demos. We could, log in a CPaaS platform, make a call, have a phone ring, edit the text in there, have it ring again. The text-to-speech would be adapted. It's small things, but the effect is really big because people will see that it's not just talk, but it's actually something that works. And I'm still excited, when I press something on a website and the phone rings in the end. It's cool. Yeah, we did an RFQ for finding solution partners. We have had decisions on partnerships by the end of 21 vendors. So we had an architecture. We knew how we want to set this up. We had a portal. So we had essentially what we had at the end of 2020, but a bit more structured and with a bit more of a process behind. So the hope was here that by 2022 we can start onboarding customers and getting it out there. And then 2022 was this big, as I said, a big black hole where a lot of where we really wonder where the time went. But this is when we really needed to go to the organization and involve colleagues that are usually part of a product introduction process and for not just for demo connectivity but for actual connectivity and all these things. This is what takes time. This is where you have to rely on normal processes. And this is where for good reasons as well. So I'm not saying it's all bad, but it's just something where you won't see, in the end we're also going to have what we had here when you just look at it, but we just have it in a carrier grade way, so to say. It just takes time, and it's hard for a small incubation team to do that when you don't have the scale it would need to really address all the stakeholders, I guess. So yeah, the presentation I think is quite accurate. Just a quick overview of what we are working on when it comes to CPaaS, when it comes to cloud communications. So it's actually not just CPaaS and CPaaS as such, the communication platform as a service, or APIs on top of our enablers. It's much more essentially that we want to connect carriers and their customers and enterprises, so B2B, B2B2X, with their end customers. So we're talking almost exclusively here A2P. We're not looking at enabling your SIM cards or your endpoints somehow with programmable features. This is something that's interesting, but that's not what we're doing. We're really looking at having enabling companies and enterprises to engage with their customers. And for this, we're setting up kind of a portfolio consisting of CPaaS as a classic, let's say, telco enablement. We have omnichannel as part of programmable communications, which includes different channels than SMS. So you have WhatsApp there, you have Apple there, you have also RCS there, which is one of the telco channels, but of course it needs to be extended with others to make sense. So all of that is part here, and this would be then forming the programmable layer that in the end enables enterprises to have APIs and to be able to kind of communicate bidirectionally with their customers. And then we have other products like a numbers product where you would enable, again, our wholesale customers mostly and our own services to integrate phone numbers, because phone numbers are essential for this way back when customers want to talk to enterprises. When you do that through the regular channels and not in-app or anything, you need identifiers, and that's usually a phone number. So if they would send traffic from a number, I want to receive that, you need a number product, and then we have also a trunking product as part of this proposition. And that forms kind of the scope of the incubation team that I'm a part of currently. Looking at CPaaS, and I think this is also somehow now thinking a bit about it, what's actually enabled by CPaaS, and why do I think it's interesting? It's not necessarily only from an iceberg perspective, the things you see. It's new A2P channels, it's API exposure, so it's very interesting. It's the usual suspect features like programmable SMS, email numbers, and all that stuff. It's also real-time voice and video, which is quite new for carriers. So this is something and we come to that later, that is new, and you need to find ways to deal with it, and I'll explain why. But it's also a lot of the potential that's currently, I would say, when people not so familiar and so long into it would overlook. So you have, for example, a different way of looking at analytics, yeah, and part of TADS was also for a long time the user experience, yeah. So this is one of the main things we want to discuss. It's not just technology; it's also user experience. And I couldn't imagine a website or an app where you wouldn't, as an owner, want to optimize how people move through that app. What are used features? What are not used features? And those are some of the things you can, of course, get with CPaaS, yeah, with the events that people go through IVRs, or with the way people interact with these applications. You get, of course, analytics and statistics, and you can optimize your communications apps. That may as well have been a side product of older legacy apps, but it's not really, has been part of these kind of IN applications, something like this, by intent. And I think this is something where we can really benefit from as being the enablers for communication and communications processes. It's also this whole portfolio of transitioning from service to features. You know, this funnel, I think Dean presented it a while ago, this feature, you know, service, feature, function, kind of what voice becomes. Voice becomes contextual, and the possibility to not just provide a voice service, but voice as one of many features that would be in many applications, and that would always be part of a solution, but it's not a solution anymore. I think is a view that you need to establish within a carrier, within a company, because it does not only impact technology, it impacts product thinking, it impacts also billing and other things. How, you know, and I think that's one of the major also looking ahead. What's beyond CPaaS, let's say in the beginning, CPaaS 1.0 or whatever you want to call it. So beyond just enabling, what can you do after once you have these capabilities? One of the key points. And the last thing I think is the setup you have when you do this. So on some things you may want to build. With some things you want to partner, but you want to also carefully select with whom you partner, and not just on a horizontal layer, meaning building up the API stack, let's say, layer by layer, but also on a vertical integration layer, what kind of capabilities, such as text-to-speech and so on, you pull in, what do you maybe have available in other departments. All of these things, I think, are very, very relevant, and none of this is classic NT work, let's say. So what an NT team and a carrier would usually not think about these things, but when it comes to CPaaS, it's really important. And from an evolutionary step, and looking at, I now swapped the iceberg, if you wish. So this here is the top, what we are doing now, the CPaaS story. That's very exciting because it's new for telcos, and it's really a thing that is considered a lot of potential, but it's just one of three, let's say, buckets here, I would say. So of course we do A2P now with APIs, definitely with APIs, but it's still just existing technology. We are connecting endpoints with server applications. It's also an existing business model. In the end, we're going to charge per message sent. We're going to have a country-based charging. We're going to charge per minute in the beginnings. All of these things are as they were, let's say, and also from a customer relations perspective and how customers use your service. A lot of it is a bit improved, but it's just, I would say, the first iterations. You validate use cases, you think of what works, what doesn't, you may be able to cluster it, you see what works in certain verticals, you may want to think then how to build solutions out of that, but this is really, I would say, only the first phase, this enablement. The second phase, the disruptive layer, and again, disruptive for carriers, WebRTC is old, we've learned that, but for carriers it's still new, and that doesn't just mean that when WebRTC you get voice and video. It means that you have a channel that no longer relies on interconnection between carriers, that's independent of that. You don't need certain things anymore. Standardization is something completely different. WebRTC for carriers isn't really standardized because there is no GSMA standard yet. You have WebRTC in your phones, you have APIs that don't drain your battery as much as they used to because you have dedicated processors. You can get a dedicated network link if you want that, the same way Voice over LTE does it. So, telco is not rocket science. Volta is essentially an app on top of an LTE network. WebRTC can be that app as well. And you need to start looking at it, I would say, from that perspective, and that's disruptive because it affects pricing, it affects how you understand inter-carrier work. I think that the conferencing use case is quite an interesting one. I can use WebEx, you can use Teams. If I'm inviting you, I send you an email with a WebEx link. If you invite me, you send me an email with Teams links or whatever. So there's a mechanism of signaling, there's a mechanism of exchanging things, and we don't need WebEx and Teams to interconnect. It's fine. We use either one uses the application. They use it in the future. Maybe we use a TADSummit web page where we share the content and where we have actually communications inbuilt. So that would be kind of the evolution we're looking at. It's not communications as a separate service, which was the prevalent example kind of here. And then we have also, again, business model disruptions, new pricing, you have internal competition because a minute before is a different minute now, and you have, the whole industry, let's say, with inter-carrier charges, when you terminate in other networks you pay, when traffic is terminated you earn money, all of a sudden you don't have that layer. If 5 carriers are using the same CPaaS platform, you could even bypass that entirely, that interconnection on the connectivity layer, just do it on the top layer. So there's a lot of thought that comes right after, but that's not even thought about yet, let's say, or at least not in the practical project we talk about CPaaS, and that's not what's currently steering interest. And then the last point is a bit of a vision, I already hinted at it. You can have a different kind of communications layer if you wish. So legacy is just a gateway, it's no longer the foundation, but it will become a gateway. You have this layer where if more and more carriers do CPaaS and they use similar providers, they use maybe not even the same ones, but if all these providers use similar languages, we have TWIML, we have RCML, we have LAML, we have Twexit, every Twilio is kind of the de facto standard the same way AWS is the de facto standard, but just because there is no GSMA standard doesn't mean we cannot use it, and doesn't mean we cannot build on it, we cannot collaborate with other carriers, we can use blueprints and share them and so on. So there's a lot of potential in this, I think. Communication is just yet another enabler, yet another service. It's nothing special. This sense of entitlement in telecoms that we also see when it comes to CPaaS, and when you have discussions, I think this is something we really need to overthink. And last but not least, as I mentioned, carrier relations and also regulations is something that will eventually evolve, and it's up to us as well how we can drive that, I would say, in a way, because it's necessary. It was necessary for things like voice over Wi-Fi, where you no longer, the physical link, and we talked earlier when we heard about the SIM card. It's not necessarily the plastic versus the other. It's the physical link that you have with this endpoint, and with WebRTC and with browser-based access technologies, all of that goes away, and that disrupts the telco dynamics and such. And then there's the practical view of this iceberg, which is less about things I spoke so far, but more about, you have on the top the features, the partners, you need to select them carefully. You want to partner with companies that don't steal your customers or that don't steal the competency in your company. You don't want them to poach your good people. You actually want them to work together and to learn from each other. So that's important, but it's also the whole internal challenges, as I mentioned, the incubation team, the team that starts something like this. If you want to do it right, you cannot do it with, let's say, a lot of the legacy stuff. The classic NT approach doesn't work here because standardization, everything has different pace, in my opinion at least. You will face a lot of legal challenges, and we face them. You will face a lot of, you need to align strategies. There's, the failure mindset on paper versus actual is something that is like, of course, we embrace failure, we don't ask for permission, we ask for forgiveness, but in the end, which manager really does that and wants to advance in this community? So, it's good, and I don't really want to complain, but it's just something that happens in these big companies. Again, it's not an individual's fault, just at a certain size, if you're not like that, you are not this big company anymore, you will eventually die out, and because we managed to stay that big and that relevant, it comes with certain drawbacks. It's like everything has two sides. It's essentially also the idealistic innovation view meeting reality, so the bit naive approach to certain things helps you get to a certain point, but eventually you need to adjust, and that's certainly something our project faces as well. So I'm coming to the end. One slide here, our CPaaS offering, it may look like a marketing slide, but I think why are we doing it is a question that we are asked frequently, and also put here, telcos shouldn't give up, because the next speaker talks about should telcos give up in CPaaS, and I believe certainly not. And some of the things might sound like cliche, but I think there is something behind it once you really talk to customers, once you look at B2B, once you get also the problems they face. It doesn't matter whether or not you are a trusted brand, whether they know you, whether if they buy internet from you, if they buy telephony from you. For them, it's natural to come to you when they need SMS for a use case, or when they may not know they need SMS as an API, but when they want to discuss something they have in mind where SMS and telephony is involved, you have that connection to them. They come to you. It is something that you should use. It's a certain association with trust, with security, and so on. And it is, I think, a strong reason why you want to offer these things yourself, or at least under your brand. It doesn't mean you need to build everything from scratch, but at least under your brand. Buying directly from the service creator and having access directly to the network is also, I think, a benefit, and we've seen this in countless studies. I remember on the API days in Amsterdam, the Twilio case is one of these big examples where, you know, in the first year when they came, they said, oh, it is all so good and it's great. The second year they said, well, you know, if KPN had a small part of what Twilio offers, it would be, you know, may have been the better compromise, because we've seen things now happening to our communications that necessarily wouldn't have happened with a carrier, because, you know, it's a compromise between latest, greatest features and 5x9. It's somewhere in between is the truth. And as a carrier, I believe, when you give access to your network, when you use the routes, when you don't optimize, let's say, for the substance, but when you really say what we offer has its price, and you manage to establish this as well in the markets, in the local markets. People know you're not the cheapest, but you're reliable. You have good connectivity. It usually works. The network, that's why I put this award sign here. The network tests for DT are good ones, and this is all technology, but also a perception you build on with such a proposition. And I think this can be a very powerful one. And last but not least, we offer, of course, other features like communications APIs, like network APIs as well, so QoS and other network characteristics that are being exposed, I think are interesting. Last but not least, I mentioned already compatibility with the market leader, so we're not looking at some one API standard from the GSMA, but really what is used out there, and we really try to get developer feedback, also build up experience within the company about developers. And it's a closing slide, it's all there. It's nothing of this is, let's say, slideware. So we have an API gateway, we have a portal behind that, we have, there's a pipeline of customers that are just waiting for us finishing, let's say, the last steps of this. These APIs, we start with SMS this year, so there will be an SMS API. You will be able to go to a website, sign up with your credit card, book an API and send SMS. And as trivial as it sounds, you cannot do this today with most of the carriers. You cannot just sign up. We are going to offer this, and we are going to bring CPaaS features with partners in there. We have POCs about network capabilities. There was a talk the other day on a Total Telecom's event where this was presented, and we have use cases with partners that consume these APIs. That's going to be in that portal. So it's a growing thing. It's real. We also have the mindset of learning, of understanding what works, what doesn't. QoS is always something as well, where you say, well, do you need QoS for videos if the codecs are so good that most situations they can cope with? How often are you on a mobile network? But all of these questions, let's say, we can tackle, and we can actually learn from practical experience, and we have a framework behind that, and the mindset and the team behind that, from the board down to the actual people working on it that support this. Yeah. So it was, in short, the journey with a lot of honesty, but I think it makes sense to encourage those that think about something like this, or those that partner with telcos. It's not always that obvious where the issues lie, and sometimes they are not. You cannot really. But there's a lot of this is because we're that big. But again, with this size comes also potential that I think we have a very good chance of tapping into here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sebastian.